to advise us this is a meeting, obviously, physically here in the town hall, and it is now being live streamed. Jessica, can I hand over to you to talk through the proceedings?
Good evening, everybody. Just to remind you, please, can you use your mics today in the chamber? Oh, sorry, 1 second. Please only speak when invited to by the chair. All participating members are to keep their camera on during the proceedings unless they are having connection issues. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communications via the chair. Please ensure officers remotely attending that your mics are muted when you are not speaking. If you're referring to a specific page or picture in the report, please refer to the page number. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting. Please do not use the chat functions for putting formal questions to the committee or to make other comments. Any persistent destructive behaviour will result in removal from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Before I continue, I would like to invite Mayor Glanville to say a few words before we continue the meeting. Mayor Glanville.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for stepping in as Chair and Deputy Mayor for a second Cabinet running. I'm currently self-isolating after coming into contact with someone yesterday that later tested positive for coronavirus, and finding the ability to get tests as challenging as our residents. So obviously, until I get the results of a PCR test, I'll be isolating at home and doing all events and meetings virtually. I know that will be the same for a lot of colleagues and residents going into this week, and I'm sure they're finding it as challenging. And I understand the challenges that people are facing. Last night, we clearly heard from the Prime Minister about the concerning rise of coronavirus cases, and specifically the Omicron variant. We've heard a further update from the Secretary of State in the House this afternoon, and a further raising of the threat level around coronavirus. Last week, we saw some coronavirus restrictions returned, such as mandatory mask wearing on public transport and in certain venues, and I'm sure all of us welcome those further measures. Today, I met with the Council's Director of Public Health, Dr. Sandra Husbands, and her team alongside Councillor Kennedy and the Chief Executive, as well as later leaders from across London. And I know Deputy Mayor Nicholson represented the administration on a call with the leader of the Labour Party and his team. Across all of those meetings, it could not be clearer that coronavirus cases are rising and may represent a serious threat to the health of Hackney and the country this Christmas. Nationally, we've seen that there are 54,000 new coronavirus cases, including over 1,500 Omicron cases, the single highest daily figure we've seen since the discovery of the variant. We've seen 10 people at least 10 have been hospitalised, and I think we heard earlier today that one person has now died from the new variant. So it's clear that this variant represents a significant threat to us all, and it represents half of all cases in London as things stand today. We also have seen that cases continue to rise of the Delta variant, and across both variants there is an increase in hospitalisations. If you look at the current published dashboard that the Council publishes on its website, you'll have seen that just in the last week there's a 48% increase in coronavirus cases. The number of local hospital admissions has increased, and we should balance those two things out and recognise that there's often a significant delay between cases and admissions. It's clear from the conversations that I've had today that the local NHS in East London is under significant pressure. And I would like to again take the opportunity to thank all of the NHS staff, social care staff, council and key workers and volunteers who do so much to keep Hackney safe, and will be dealing on very low resilience with what we should probably now call a third or fourth wave. Sadly, for all of our efforts over the last 20 months, local people continue to die from coronavirus. Councillor Kennedy mentioned last week that we lost 303 friends, family members and neighbours last year to coronavirus. The similar death toll this year is 268. So in total, 571 residents have died from coronavirus, with 15 dying in the past month. And very soberly, 8 dying in a week alone in early November. And if you look at that in comparison to other weekly rates, that is a significant increase. As I said, I think we all want to see these figures come down, and that is why we welcomed the measures that were introduced last week. And I think we would also recognise that there's probably some more work to do. We actually said that the mask wearing in shops and public transport should have stayed over the summer. I know that's a position the Mayor of London held in terms of TfL, and it's only latterly that the government has caught up with that position. As I have done on numerous occasions in person and virtually over the last 20 months, would urge everyone in Hackney to follow the 4 steps to keep themselves and others safe and to protect the local NHS. So that is staying home, like I have done last month if I felt unwell and got tested, or ensure that you get tested if you come in contact with someone who's tested positive, as I'm doing this evening. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, watch your space and keep indoor spaces ventilated. Most importantly, of course, and given the booster announcement, get vaccinated or get the booster as soon as you can. There are lots of different ways of doing that, and community pharmacy ensure that there's much more expanded access closer to where people have lived than ever before. And as you'll have seen from Hackney's public health campaigns, please also do get the flu jab this winter, but take advice obviously between those 2 vaccinations. It's also, I know it's really difficult at the moment, but really important to get tested, whether it's the regular lateral flows twice a week or more often if you're out with out and at risk, and also taking the PCR tests as guided. And I think all of these measures are vital if people are planning to see friends and family over the Christmas period. All of these measures will help keep Hackney safe, and the council is standing by our NHS to continue this work. I also just have to mention the fact that over 100,000 local residents are not fully vaccinated, and that's for 2 vaccines before we even talk about the booster. So if you have at any point been hesitant about the vaccination programme, please get your first vaccine before the end of the year, given the presence of the variant. The council is doing more than ever before to promote vaccine work. There's information for parents on a live stream tomorrow. We have the vaccine van going to Forester Hall, which is a community hall in Kings Park, working with residents in an area of the borough that has previously seen lower vaccine uptake. We've been outreaching to our various diverse communities and focusing in on young people. Later this week, I'll be thanking with Councillor Kennedy our 230 community champions and 8 grant-funded community groups. They're working with us and the local NHS to promote this information, and we are doing more around pop-ups and clinics. We are also seeing delivery in primary care of almost 1,000 vaccinations just in Spring Hill surgery alone. I would like to partially echo, I know that people will be watching the challenges and the shameful events that have surrounded Downing Street and the senior leadership of this country over the past few weeks. When we all may have our own political views on what the Prime Minister and staff may or may not have done, that is not a reason to not act to keep Hackney safe and follow public health guidance. It's really, really important that we do that. That is far more important than the politics of this situation, although in another place I might get drawn into that. I realise this is a really difficult message as we end the year, but do stay safe, stay home if you need to, get vaccinated and get tested. In that context, Chair, I hand back to you. And I think, as we said at the Carol service over the weekend, I know that people's resilience is low. People do need this Christmas break and the opportunity to see family and friends, but please do so in a safe way as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. And just reiterate some of the points you made when you spoke about vaccinations. If anyone is listening and they have any concerns, queries or questions about vaccination, we absolutely understand that your feelings, your queries and your concerns are absolutely valid, and we have healthcare professionals to answer all of those questions. I mean, Councillor Kennedy is working very closely alongside the Mayor to support anyone that needs that work, and many of us as Cabinet members have been part of that work as well. So please do get in contact with us if you have queries or questions or concerns. And the Mayor talked about some of the Christmas Carol services that have been going on over the weekend, and one thing that you will hear is hope. And you may say, well, why talk about hope in a time like this? And we're always hopeful, but one thing that I can rely on and be sure of in an uncertain time is that in Hackney we really do come together because we understand, believe with and always support communities, and that is one thing that we can always continue to rely on for one another. So thank you again, Mayor Campbell, for that. I've had apologies from Councillor Fajana Thomas. I've had no urgent business. Members, do you have any declarations of interest? None. Notice of intention to conduct business in private or any representations received and response to such representations? No. Item 5. So unfortunately, the deputation spokesperson, Dr. Rembrandt Kopler, is unable to attend the meeting this evening. We will include a written deputation in the minutes as a written response, and this is on behalf of the Mayor and Cabinet, and that will be provided tomorrow. Dr. Rembrandt Kopler, did actually request a written response as he was able to not attend in person. So thank you. So we're going to move swiftly on to item 6, and I'm going to ask the Mayor to introduce his item. Mayor Glanville, back to you.
Thanks, Chair. And obviously I'm not there in person, so can't vote on this report, but I did just want to say, as set out, and just very briefly though, highlight in the capital update that we're continuing to invest in our in-borough SEM provision. That's something that is close to all of our hearts, and especially you, Deputy Mayor Bramble and Councillor Woodley, who's led this programme and this work, and it continues to bear fruit in terms of the provision we're able to invest in. We're also continuing to invest in our transport infrastructure, as you'll see from this report, and both of those things are only possible because of our track record in attracting external funding from the government and from other sources, but also, and I think we mentioned this last time when Deputy Mayor Nicholson spoke, that much of the capital investment we're able to deliver is only because of the way that we use SIL and Section 106 to invest in our borough's infrastructure, and that is what we're seeking to do in the report this evening. Thank you.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Nicholson.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. And it was just to kind of really just build a little on the Mayor's introduction, if I may, and in particular, the kind of proposal to bring forward a sustainable transport planner. And I know that sort of Councillor Coburn's work has been absolutely kind of crucial in kind of improving air quality, reducing congestion, and actually kind of creating the environment for modal shift to take place across the borough. And just to welcome this investment and the bringing forward of this sustainable transport planner to engage with businesses so that they too feel confident as we transition to a car-free economy and a car-free borough. And just to kind of recognise that again, we're making as a council and as an administration an investment into change rather than just imposing change and not supporting the community through those processes of change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I know that you often work really closely with businesses, so it's really important that we offer that reassurance given the impact that COVID has had on some of our local businesses. And just to echo the comments from the Mayor, you know, investment around SEND is always very important. And I know that Councillor Woodley and I are looking forward to that work and piece of work going forward. I wouldn't like to say I'm going to abuse Chair's privilege, everyone, but I would like to, as Chair, take us back to item 5 to say that actually what I didn't say is that we always welcome deputations brought to the meeting. It's been one of the Mayor's manifesto commitments, and as active lead members in all of our different portfolios, we encourage that engagement from the public and always welcome deputations at this meeting. Move on to item 7. Colleagues, can we agree the recommendations from item 6 from the report introduced by the Mayor? Thank you. On to item 7 for the overall financial position. Can I hand over to Councillor Chapman to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report deals with two issues, the 21-22 financial position, the current year, and proposed savings for 22-23 and onwards. First, the budget provision for the current year. We report here a slight improvement on the September position, which was presented to last Cabinet. And while while we welcome this, there are many pressures on the council budget, notably COVID, the recovery from the cyber attack, and pressures on adult and children's social care budgets. So it's important the council continues to bear down on costs in order to minimise overspends and make sure that we retain a sound financial position for the current financial year. In relation to the budget for next year, there is a table in paragraph 2.9 sets out a list of savings proposals to contribute towards balancing the budget next year. Despite the statement of the Chancellor in October, we are not anticipating a big increase in resources. Many of his proposals represent money already announced, money that's ring-fenced, and much of it assumes the council tax rises rather than increases in grant. I'll save that speech for another occasion, Chair, if I may, but just to say that, in short, money remains tight, and we have no reason at this stage to amend the gap that we estimated at the start of the year. The schedule you see in the report is the culmination of a difficult process, many hours of time of Cabinet colleagues and chief officers. All through this, we've stayed ruthlessly focused on the Mayor and Council's priorities and the need to protect frontline services, which I believe these proposals do. So if I could just thank colleagues for all the work they put into this and commend the report to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Do colleagues have any queries or questions? So what I would like to say, it's disappointing to hear there are no new resources, Councillor Chapman, given that local government has lost 60p in every pound. I want to commend you and the officers that you work alongside for continuing to be really ambitious for our local residents while demonstrating fiscal responsibility at a very challenging time for our residents. Can members agree the recommendations? Move on to item 8 on the agenda. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Cockburn to introduce the period for pay and display parking. Councillor Cockburn.
Thank you, Councillor Bramble, Deputy Mayor Bramble, for giving me the way. So the paper is obviously quite self-explanatory, and obviously it's the introduction of a minimum short-stay parking, which is totally in line with our sustainable transport policy, which is to avoid a car-led recovery, and of course to try to encourage more people to walk, cycle, and take public transport in Hackney to both improve air quality, but also to try to reduce some of that congestion that we do see in London. We know that that's been a big problem over the past decade. So the report is suggesting that we obviously put forward a minimum short stay parking for a minimum of 1 hour, and that's what we're asking members of this cabinet to agree for the session. So as set out.
Thank you, Councillor Cockburn. Do colleagues have any queries or contributions? Deputy Mayor Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. And just to also acknowledge, as part of the recommendations, I think Councillor Cockburn is tabling this evening, Chair, is the kind of sort of welcome introduction of giving some form of delegated authority to the head of service to be able to kind of look at a local neighbourhood, to be able to tailor a scheme specifically for a neighbourhood. I think, as we all recognise, every neighbourhood is different in the borough, every town centre is different in the borough, and just being that sensitive to implementation, again, another really helpful kind of step just to kind of support not just the local economy and businesses, but I think residents all round. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I agree. It's that important neighbourhood place shaping piece that leads into, I would say, argue the item that we had before when we were talking about businesses, but also in promoting active travel and all the things that we want to see, but understanding the broader needs of all of our community. Can I ask colleagues to agree the recommendations? Thank you. Let's move on to item 9, private sector housing and policy. I'm going to hand over to Mayor Glanville and Councillor Meeman, who are both online. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to go first, Mayor Glanville?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'll hand over to the substantive to Councillor Marima. Just to say that there's an element of regulatory tidying up about this report, but I think it's worth just restating our commitment to not just better renting campaign, but using what are limited resources to serve 34,000 households in Hackney, and probably the largest growing sector of our local residents, not just in 1 year, but over the last decade. And I sit here as a private renter myself, which is well known. We've been campaigning on this issue now for over a decade, and many of the powers that we set out in this report have not just come down from government easily. It has taken the actions and campaigning of people in this borough and beyond, whether they're in Generation Rent or Hackney Gigs or many of the other campaign organisations like Shelter and others that have drawn attention to the plight of private renters. And what we're doing here, obviously, is updating our policies and strategies around this. But we also continue and keep up the fight for more powers to properly regulate our private rented sector. It is now probably where the vast majority of people on low incomes, if they're not in social housing, live. They still face some of the worst conditions despite all of our efforts. And I think what we're doing here is clearly setting out what we are doing now. But I do see that reference, and I was really pleased to see it there, that we have to update our housing strategy next year. And I know, and I'm sure Councillor Moon will go into further detail, just how important continuing our focus and resources around those services to private renters are. I'd like to thank Kevin and the other officers on the call for their work in setting out this paper and pulling together the necessary documentation and the work they do every day with those limited resources to keep our private renters safe as far as they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Councillor Meeman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. I just want to reiterate my thanks to officers, in particular to Kevin Thompson and his team, for the work that they have done. This piece of work was a manifesto commitment that feels many moons ago and started out in looking at campaigning. We have moved from pulling together all of the different strands of enforcement work that happened into a very high functioning team who were able to really work very effectively on behalf of our private sector tenants across the borough. And I'm just really pleased that we've been able to bring this together into one place. As Mayor Glanville says, this doesn't introduce new information into the public domain, but what it does do is provide information in one place for both tenants and landlords. And just also to reiterate, we remain really pleased to continue working with those landlords across the borough that are able to support our private sector tenants, and where we're able to resolve issues, we try to do that. This document really just makes sure that everybody's understanding the same information. And I think it's just really briefly important to think about the context where this piece of work started and where we are now. Mayor Glanville is right in the introduction, talks about the changes that have happened demographically to our borough. We're now post-COVID, although potentially entering a new phase of that. We're now facing a situation where those people in the private rented sector probably need our help more than at any time in the past, notwithstanding those families and people aging in the private rented sector, for whom in the 3 boroughs where the licensing scheme is in force, we provide extra protection and support. So with all of that being said, I'd like to commend this report to the Cabinet, and thank you all again for your time.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville, and thank you, Councillor Meeman. Do colleagues have any contributions or queries or questions? No, just want to reiterate the work that you're doing, Councillor Meeman, with officers and Mayor Glanville on this important piece of work. And, you know, this isn't about any individual landlord, but it is about ensuring that those people that are in private accommodations have that tenancy security, and that is what we continue to lobby for, and just want to commend the work that you are doing with the Mayor and officers around this piece of work. Can I ask members to agree the recommendations? Item 10, any other unrestricted business for me to consider? I've not been told of anything, but it is Christmas and I am feeling generous. No? No one's taking me up on that offer. So the last item on the agenda is just to consider the dates below. I will note that the first meeting back is the 24th of January, where I hope to be welcoming the Mayor back in chair. And just to say that I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. I hope whatever you do, whether it's a traditional Christmas or if you're a Christian or you just want to have some time out, I hope you do it. It's been a difficult time and it's still a very difficult time at Christmas, but I'm sure and I hope we all get just a little bit of time to have some of that Christmas cheer. Thank you for your attendance this evening. Take care. Good night.